What's good, y'all? Mikey T, the movie star, and I'm back with another exclusive. 50 Cent went off on his Instagram once again. You know, he had posted this picture of himself in the director's chair. Curtis, 50 Cent Jackson, Fightland, his new record with Chef G, Sleepy Hollow, Jeremiah. 50's in the director's chair, you know what I mean? Pretty much like he's been his entire career, you know what I mean? Outside of letting Eminem and Dr. Dre direct him, 50 Cent has pretty much been in the director's chair for the majority of his career, you know what I mean? Stepping outside of music and then pretty much producing his own television shows and films. You know, it's been a natural progression for 50 Cent. So he took this picture on the set of his new video, Fightland, and he actually reminisced about some of his old G Unit times, I'm thinking. He said, I should have kept all these joints for myself. I gave these suckers some heat. I gave these suckers some heat. All right, so immediately you got to think 50 Cent is talking about the game. Immediately you got to think 50's talking about Hate It or Love It and How We Do. You know, but there's been multiple interviews where the game actually said he was the first one to record on How We Do. You know, he said that Dre left the studio and he was looking like at an old beat. Dre came back in the studio and Dre's like, nah, that's old. And then he's like, yo, check out what I want to do on it. You know, and then 50 Cent heard the record and that intrigued 50, which culminated with Game officially joining G Unit, if that's how you want to believe the story. That's one of the ways the story's been told. You know, a lot of people online just assume that 50 Cent gave the Game How We Do and Hate It or Love It. A lot of people say that. Like Yayo has said in interviews, 50 played us the album on the balcony. There's a lot of confusion that could be left there with that, you know, narrative of the story. You know what I mean? Because 50 could have played you finished records, you know what I mean, that had been done months prior. You know what I'm saying? Yayo didn't say if 50 played the skeletons of these records. So 50 said, I should have kept all these joints for myself. I gave these suckers some heat. So are you referring to Lloyd Banks? Are you referring to Tony Yayo? Because the first single on Lloyd Banks' album was On Fire. 50 Cent didn't really need On Fire. 50 Cent's record with Tony Yayo was So Seductive. You know what I mean? A lot of people will cut So Seductive off before we even get a Tony Yayo verse to keep it 100. Young Buck didn't get anything from 50 Cent. Not until his second album, where he literally had to diss. He had to diss Cameron with 50 Cent in order to get a 50 Cent duet. Let's be real about this. Come on, are we on here to talk or are we going to be real? 50 Cent didn't even do anything on Young Buck's album singles. He was at the start of the Let Me In video and he said a couple lines. Right? Tell me if I'm wrong. That's all he did for the Let Me In video, because I would have to say they probably thought Young Buck was going to flop. Shorty Wanna Ride came out. 50 Cent wasn't on that hook. He didn't give nothing to those suckers in reference to Shorty Wanna Ride. Was 50 Cent featured on I'm So Fly? Was 50 Cent featured on Karma? It was Lloyd Banks and Avant, not Lloyd Banks and 50 Cent. Maybe 50 did the ad-libs for On Fire, but I don't know. When you look at it, On Fire wouldn't have made much sense for 50 Cent's career. It would have seemed too generic. So why not give that one to Lloyd Banks? So 50's saying this, and he has a song playing, and it's called Payback. And I found that interesting because I was like, oh yeah, 50, he might not be talking about some of the commercial records. He might be talking about some of the street records that he would immediately popped off on as a solo artist, even without G Unit, like a Payback. You know what I mean? But a lot of people in the comments, um, a lot of people in the comments are actually asking for a G Unit reunion. They're asking for, you know, for 50 to put Banks onto the shows, on the stage, they say. People are even online saying, crazy to think that 20 years later, Banks would be the one putting out music, the most consistent. Well, let me be real about that. You know, Banks does have very consistent music, but 50 Cent is still the most consistent in the group because of the fact that he's actually producing projects that the majority of the world is seeing. Lloyd Banks has these independent projects that are just not what they once were. Um, Let me see. We got some more comments on here to go over, though, you guys. I saw quite a bit of comments on here, and they're pretty crazy. Someone said Lloyd was cool. Someone said a mixtape tour. Someone said Banks wrote In the Club, which has been a major rumor out there. But 50 did say on the song, 50 told me, 50 said Banks told me to switch the style up, and if they hate, then let them hate, but watch the money pile up. Um, Somebody actually promoted the new Halloween Havoc 6, Six of Swords. Someone said at least Lloyd Banks is still releasing that heat. How about you? 50 is still releasing heat. Like I mentioned, he has a new movie dropping January 30th. You know what I mean? He has a whole new movie dropping. He just literally ended the whole BMF series. You know what I mean? He's literally dropping multiple times per year just as an executive producer. Not to mention the new Fightland record that he's doing. You know what I mean? So, so yeah, 50 had a follow up post though. Of course, he had a follow up post. He said, "Yup, should have kept this too. I'm going solo. F the group. I'm going solo. F the group." Really, bro? Really, Fifth? You're going to say F the group? You know, you got Tony Yayo and Uncle Murder with you, and they're really holding it down on tour. You know what I mean? Just like Banks and Yayo would hold it down on tour, just like Banks, Yayo, and Buck would hold it down on tour. You know what I mean? So Fifth's always had the guys around him, and the majority of the time, I would have to say he's been performing his music. Now, Tony Yayo said something that's interesting. Now, something that supports my claim is the fact that he brought Yayo and Murda out with him for the Get Rich or Die Trying anniversary tour. What was it, like 20 years, something like that? 21 years or something like that. Tony Yayo actually commented on 50's page. It got like 1,700 likes, 107 replies. Tony Yayo's putting himself out there. You know what I mean? Tony Yayo said G Unit mixtape tour worldwide. So Tony Yayo is actually calling for a G Unit mixtape tour. It would have to be the G Unit Beg for Mercy tour, though. That's what it would really be. You know what I mean? But everybody loves the classic G Unit mixtapes. You know what I mean? No Mercy, No Fear. 50 Cent is the future. You know what I mean? What is it? Automatic Gunfire. Am I mistaken that one? They got a lot of projects out there, and Tony Yayo was my favorite on those verses. So I think Yayo has got a great idea here. You know what I mean? And it's just it's a 25th anniversary G Unit tour, and it would be dope to see other members of G Unit pop out, possibly, but also that could be saved. You know what I mean? That shit could be saved for the future, because they could do a Beg for Mercy 25th anniversary with Buck and Banks. You know, Yayo was not really featured on that album outside of Groupie Love And was there another record that Yayo had on that? I know he did a remix version of My Buddy, which would be cool to see performed live with all the guys. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of money to be made there. But the thing is, 50 doesn't need that money. 50 just went out and did a tour of over 100 shows, and I don't doubt that he could do the same thing for G Unit. I just don't know if he really wants to. Touring really it puts a lot of wear and tear on an artist. You see it over the years how the artists start acting different. So 50 has it in him to do these shows. He's got the projects in the catalog to do the shows, but it's just going to be if he physically wants to do it. A lot of times artists could get annoyed with the touring. Sometimes you could just conflict with the scheduling. 50's always talking about the fact that he has like 20 or 30 shows in the vault. You know what I mean? And that just seems like it's taken precedent in 50's career. Calling these guys suckers, saying he's going to go solo, F the group. I look at this like it's kind of a joke. He's joking around. You know what I mean? He's having fun with it. That's what 50 does. Just like he was clowning on Yayo about the Jim Jones beef. People are commenting, man, bring the unit back. Someone even said you should do it solo. And I'm wondering, is 50 Cent having kind of like regrets about what he ended up doing? Would he have rather followed up Get Rich or Die Trying with possibly a second 50 Cent album? So he then could have used a lot of those major singles and had a big second album and a big third album. After the second 50 Cent album, everything started to kind of crumble. You know what I mean? From doing 800,000 2 weeks in a row on Get Rich or Die Trying and 1 million plus on The Massacre, they couldn't even pull in 700,000 on Curtis. It's a reflection of the music. It's basically the music that 50 allegedly had to give away. You know what I mean? Third Round would have been a lot different. That Massacre album, it would have been a lot different had he had the other records on his second album. If you don't understand what I mean, is I think The Massacre technically should have been his third album. The way that album was so commercial, you know what I mean? The general public has to be able to accept you in that light, or it could become uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like Ja Rule going from Holla Holla to Between Me and You. It was almost like Between Me and You didn't go to number one on Billboard. It went to like number 13. You know what I mean? Ja Rule had to start warming up to Billboard. 50 Cent, that shit was overnight. In the club, 9 weeks at number one, 9 consecutive weeks. 21 questions to follow up in the club, 7 weeks on the number one at Billboard, 4 consecutive weeks. The man took over the whole world overnight after grinding through the streets. Don't get it twisted. You know what I mean? This guy went through it all, from signing deals with Columbia Records to, you know what I mean, starting his own group when nobody wanted to believe in him. You know what I mean? And he had to go up against those other juggernaut groups that were around. Murder Inc., Puff Daddy and Bad Boy and all them, Jay-Z setting up Rockefeller, you know what I mean? He just had so many different obstacles to go against. Then you had even like just made acts like MOP, CNN, Mobb Deep. It's like, how are you going to compete? Not only did 50 Cent compete, he got to the number one spot in the game. So his career would have been a lot different had he focused on himself and said F the group 20 years ago, rather than putting out Beg for Mercy, where they literally had Tony Yayo's face on the mural in the album. You know what I mean? They had Tony Yayo there because 50 Cent is the most strategic CEO we've seen. You know what I mean? I'd have to say he's even more strategic than Birdman, more strategic than Jay-Z. You know what I'm saying? Because looking at Jay-Z, the way they put out the Queen of the Rock project over the Rihanna project, you know what I mean? You can look to things like that. You look at Bad Boy, the way that he brought Mason and automatically had Mason a shiny suit. I judge all of these aspects when it comes to somebody as a CEO. Birdman losing his entire group. Let's not forget these things. You know what I mean? Let's not forget these things because they all play a factor when it comes to determining, you know what I mean, who is the number one CEO in the game. I just want to point out one other thing because 50 Cent actually had this post and it was very interesting, and he accompanied it with Young Buck's Prices on My Head. Um, so 50 had posted this quote that this dude, Chris Eubank from SNR, told him. He said, and my bad, Chris, if I butchered that name, but you had an amazing quote that you told 50. He told 50, the most prolific men in history were not easily angered. Anger's one of the most foolish emotions. I'm working on it. Very interesting quote right there. And like I said, it was accompanied by 50 Cent playing the song Prices on My Head. I found that very interesting. You know, even though 50% probably owns the rights to that music, you know what I mean? So it's his to use, even if he wanted to use it in probably a film, which is funny. But I just found it interesting that he posted that along with this quote.
Alert from low battery.
Because it shows you, it actually shows you, you know what I mean, how much Young Buck still ties into his life. And you guys heard it. I got the low battery, so I'm going to let it go on that note. I just wanted to address 50 Cent calling his old G-Unit members suckers, saying he should have gone solo. Also, I wanted to give 50 Cent's new movie a shout out, Moses the Black, dropping January 30th. You already know who I am, Mikey T, the movie star. I'm going to keep coming with the hottest news. You know what I mean? I'm going to come fill the streets up. When there's a void, that's when Mikey T is here. That's why I started doing this. There ain't no other bloggers that really do it like me. You know what I'm saying? I see these interviewers out there, but they don't really do it like me. They don't ask them questions like me. It's not authentic, like the way that I bring it to the game. It takes like 2 or 3 of these interviewers to really get the sauce on it that Mikey T, the movie star exclusive interviews get. And that's why I've had some of the dopest rappers actually come to me about doing an interview. And I'm very, very grateful to that because I love this, man. And I'm going to continue making an impact every single day of the week, man. I just wanted to come on here and cover this. You know what I'm saying? Because I lived through the careers of what was G-Unit. We all saw the whole G-Unit play out from the beginning with 50, Banks, and Yayo mixtape scenes. Yayo going to jail, people thinking Young Buck was Yayo, Young Buck taking over, coming into his own right with the Beg for Mercy album. Then Game coming in, you thinking G-Unit's going to turn into a 5-man collective. But then Game leaves, Young Buck gets kicked out, and by TOS, we're back to the original G-Unit. That's a quick breakdown of it, though, man. But I'm glad I could be here to feed y'all this hip-hop content. I'll see you on the next video. Follow me on Instagram, Mikey T _ the movie star.